Hey, coaches. This is Coach Chris talking about our street and team wise soccer, and that is combining trauma principles with coaching. So, this is block one, part one, and we're going to be talking about attachment and relationship skills 101. And so, just as a quick refresher from our intro episode, we are running in the background the idea of how do we get and keep lids down. And so, as part of our curriculum, we are working on embodying secure attachment as coaches and then balancing structure and nurture as we coach. So, block one starts with the coach, and we're going to be focusing on ourselves, making sure that we are able to keep our lids down and understand the processes that are involved in that. And so, to do that, we've got to review attachment science and then also aspects of self regulation. And then, block two, we're going to start talking about prevention of problems and setting healthy boundaries. And then, in block three, when things go wrong, we're going to practice some behavioral skills to help calm the situation. And then finally, in our capstone circumstance, we'll do in person training where we go over three basic sets of skills that we can build on throughout the season. So, first, we need to talk about what attachment is in the first place, and then we'll apply it to coaching slowly over these next two modules. So, the way you can think of attachment is the core code that our behavioral computer runs on. And so it's been looked at all over the world in multiple cultures. And so this is approaching what we would on the street say is kind of law for science. And so there's four basic attachment strategies, although some people use different words for them. We're going to use secure, avoidant, resistant, and chaotic. And so, as we go through these and define them, we want to remember that there are five basic skills of healthy relationships that, in essence, embody secure attachment. And that is when we are able to give, nurture, and care, and we'll expand these concepts quite a bit, receive, nurture, and care, be confident in the authentic self or our identity, negotiate for needs, and to do that without harming yourself or others. And so, as we're talking about secure attachment, these are the things that kind of roll into the the product that we are trying to develop. And so, another way to think about it is setting clear boundaries as a coach where we are properly balancing structure and the expectation and the empowerment and help to make it happen. And so this gives kids a sense of felt safety. And the thing that I want to make extraordinarily clear is that attachment science is very, very strong that we can rewrite the core code that we were left with. And we'll talk about where this comes from in the first place. But I want to make sure that everyone understands that attachment, if you find in working through these modules that you have an insecure attachment, one of these three attachments here, that is all able to be changed. So you can learn secure attachment from where you are, but it requires first an understanding of where you are before you can actually lay in the map and the plan ahead. So, how do we know about attachment? This experiment has been repeated thousands, if not millions, of times over the world. And so, you take a 6 to 18 month old child and you put it in a strange situation where there's a parent and then there's also a stranger present. And then the parent will leave the child. It's completely safe circumstance. But then the child is playing, and then they look at and gauge what happens to the child on when the parent returns. And so we're going to go through what happens next. So, approximately 50% of a healthy population has a secure attachment. So, when that child is playing and the parent leaves, that child will express emotions effectively that they are in distress, and that when that parent returns, they will go seek the parent and then calm down and then be able to continue playing. And this pattern is something that we are going to be looking for as we apply secure attachment. Now, the next is avoidant attachments. And these children, when the parents leave, they just simply keep playing. And then when the parent comes back, they continue to keep playing without expressing much, if any, emotion. You might think in our modern world that this is actually a pretty resilient kid. But the problem is when you do their cortisol stress hormones or check their skin response, their brain stem is working on overdrive and their fear response is through the roof. And so, what we need to understand as coaches and educators, for some extent, that children do not learn well when that is their internal state. And then in the resistant attachment, the children will um, get appropriately upset. But when the parents reunite with the kids actually stay upset for an extended period of time. And so we see that the parent is drawn in to this upset response, and it ends up making it a bit worse. And so if we watch these kids grow up, and then we ask their peers how they seem, when they're in peer circumstances, an avoidant will seem to have controlling type behaviors, while a resistant will seem to have confusing behaviors. And then about 5% of a healthy population, but a much, much higher percentage of children in an unhealthy population can have what's called a chaotic attachment, where they actually try all these different strategies all in one. And when these kids are asked, when their peers are asked how they behave, they often are perceived as scary. And so you can see that relational harm and insecurity increase as we go through these attachment styles and patterns. And so, indeed, we know that a child with a chaotic attachment actually has experienced from caregivers scary things themselves. Whereas on the resistant attachment, it's basically inconsistent parenting. And so they adopt this strategy to pull in the attention of the parent. Versus in the avoidant, the parent has responded in a way that the child has decided it was safer for them to not express emotions. So you're not going to you're not going to have a quiz based on just this explanation, but we will keep returning to this picture as we talk about attachment moving forward. So what about yourself? There are two free online attachment quizzes that I would encourage all of you to take to at least get a sense of how this feels and how you guys test on this. The Attachment Project one I really like because it actually differentiates between male and female attachment, which I think is important in making sense of how we see the world. And then this How We Love website talks more specifically about relationships. So perhaps there could be some help in your private life. But if you decide that you really need to take a deep dive into these issues, there is a much more comprehensive and professional attachment assessment, which is called the Adult Attachment Interview. And so that is something that you can look into, and I can even help you connect with resources that can do that. But one more thing that I want to call our attention to is this idea of implicit memories. And what these are very, very strong emotional reactions that we cannot think of a story that they link to. So sometimes if you were 10 and you were in a car accident with a red car and you see a red car and your heart rate starts jumping, you know why your heart rate is jumping because it's linked to that red car. But if you're in a movie and you see people connecting and it seems to be very happy, but you end up becoming very, very sad, that would be, and you're not sure why, that would be an implicit memory that has been laid down long before you were making aware memories. And what we know with implicit memories is even the stress in the third trimester of pregnancy can begin to make associations between even sounds and stress and other ways. So these implicit memories become something that we experienced. And very importantly, there's no fault here. There's no failure where it came from. It's just a result of the conditions that, starting in that third trimester, infants and toddlers and babies have experienced. So I just want to call out again these healthy relationship skills because as a coach, we can keep these in mind as we're watching the social interactions of the kids on our teams. And what these do is they help us embody secure attachment. And so they are giving care, and that could be verbal, that could be physical in terms of fist bumps or some type of easy type of physical attachment. But again, verbal is probably going to be where we're at. Receiving care. If someone gets a compliment, do they just shake it right off like it's nothing? Or do they say thank you and really allow that care or that nurture to hit them in a deep way? Next, we talked last time about the idea of shame. And so we're looking at how authentic and fully formed an identity is, and if you detect there is shame or not. A healthy, authentic self is needed in relationships. And then this is probably a big one for us on the soccer field is negotiating for needs without harm to self or others. And I've witnessed kids being brutal to other kids. Hey, why weren't you playing at your best today? Or something like that. And so we can continue to shape that idea to be appropriate in noting a team member who is or is not playing up to their best, but also doing it in a way that doesn't degrade an individual. And resiliency will grow in naturally when you do these kinds of things. But constantly cutting each other down oftentimes does not result in the growth that we think it might. And then just remember that the pillars that we're looking at with healthy relationship skills include connection and self regulation. So we're going to round out this episode with a bunch of self-reflection questions. And if you need to, just slow down the video and or stop it and decide how this goes for you. And so think about, and if you have people close to you that can help you answer these questions, that's going to be even better. But these come from a mindfulness expert and researcher by the name of Dan Siegel. And so, when it comes to controlling your fear, do you do that well, or do you find that that destabilizes you or dysregulates you? What about attuned communication, where you can make someone feel very present when you are communicating with them? Do you do that well or poorly? And then, if you have a certain outcome or response that you have in mind, are you flexible given the conditions to change that? Does that come off as very difficult for you to do, or is that very easy to do? Empathy and morality. Do you have a sense of being able to feel what others feel and to respond well in that circumstance? Next, emotional balance. Do you allow yourself to feel negative emotions as well as positive emotions? Or if you sense a negative emotion coming on, do you tend to hide it or stuff it? And how about intuition or insight? If things come up, especially on an emotional spectrum, do you have a good sense of why it is that you feel that way and what to do about it? Those are going to be intuition and insight like questions. And then regulation of body processes. Do you sleep well? Do you eat well? Do you drink well? Do you exercise? What kinds of things do you do to make sure that your body processes are going well? So these are all things to kind of think about. And if you're checking more poor than wells, then your dysregulation possibility is going to be a bit higher. So then what about receiving nurture? If you get compliments, do you really feel them well, or do you deny them right away that somebody just doesn't know enough about you, and then so that they're compromised in their ability to give you nurture? How well do you give nurture, compliments, and connect with other people? How well do you value and defend your authentic self? Do you tend to crumble in situations where you're challenged, or do you hold your ground, but do it in a way that's very healthy and connecting to even the other person? And then how well do you self regulate without harming other people? If you need a moment, can you take that moment easily, or is that a point of being dysregulated? And then, if you've had a hard story growing up, have you ever fully talked about that story to anybody? And then, what causes you to flip your lid? How often in your family of origin did someone else flip their lid? And then, when it comes to negative emotions like anger, fear, sadness, toxic shame, disgust, hopelessness, or overwhelm, do you allow yourself to feel those first and then regulate, or do you not ever feel those? And just when I say toxic shame, this is shame that isn't like if you fail a test that you're expected to know information and you feel bad and then work hard to get better, that's healthy shame. But if you're demeaned or made to feel less than for reasons beyond your control, that's toxic shame. So, how much do you respond to these circumstances with chaos that is very loud, negative emotions, or rigidity, which is rigid, has to be black and white expectations? So, that is chaos and rigidity. So, these questions are meant to help us sort out our risk factor of becoming dysregulated as coaches. So now let's bring in what our experience of soccer or sport has contributed to our stories. And so, to what degree, if any, do your past experiences play a part in your ability to stay regulated as a coach? Did you experience a dysregulated coach and want to be different? Or did you experience a coach that you didn't really vibe with and want to be better than that? And so another thing we can think about is if an adult is dysregulated, that is impatient or angry, how does that impact children? Does it impact all of them the exact same? What if they have various resiliency levels that we have no idea about the conditions that they grew up in that are influencing how they're impacting things? So then, are there aspects that we've talked about so far that you would like to work on moving forward? And so that's the assignment from this module is pick one or two coach regulation goals that you wish to work on or that really stood out that you've already overcome and celebrate those things. And to if there's things in this self-assessment module that you're noticing that you really would like to change, the process is basically called making sense, and that is healing. And that is building a story around your experiences that makes sense for now and even into your future. And if you need any help with that, that's why I'm a resource to the club. But remember, the very sometimes thinking about dysregulation brings shame or fear or some type of anger. But remember, we talked about this in the first session. The lesson of and the value of repair is super important. If you find that you've even dysregulated a little bit, it's okay to stop yourself and bring that to the attention of the kids and apologize for it, and then process that together as a team. So we'll talk about how we apply these concepts in the next module directly to coaching expectations moving forward. Thanks for your attention, everybody.